Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Secret Sunday session. Today, I'm joined by Hugo Toovey, and today we're going to be hearing about Hugo's story, how he has overcome adversity time and time again, in hope that everybody out there can also see that there is hope through story and through storytelling, and in sharing what we've gone through and overcome challenges, so that you can feel less alone in this life, and also know that through the tough times, there also is times of good, and there is times that you can recover and you can progress and go through life, no matter what you're challenged with. So I want to welcome Hugo in. Thank you so much for joining us today, Hugo.
Thanks so much for having me, Ashley. It's real privilege to be on your podcast, The Secret Burden. I know you do some amazing work and have some really powerful conversations. So looking forward to the next half an hour or so chatting with you.
Amazing. Thank you. Now, of course, I know a little bit about you, but for those that are listening here today, are you able to just give a brief overview of basically who you are and what it is you're doing with yourself now?
Yeah, sure. So look, I'm early 30s. I'm currently serving in the army. I've been in for almost 15 years, being promoted to major at the end of the year, which is awesome. It's a career path that there's no way I thought I would have been in for this long. But fortunately, I found a bit of a passion with what I do in the army, and that's heavily, focused around people and looking after people. But more so with my own challenges over the last, 10 or so years, the army's really supported me. And so I'm pretty, I guess, grateful that I can still serve, albeit with the health challenges I've had to overcome. And that really started from when I graduated after almost 4 years of training to graduate as a young officer. I was first diagnosed with testicular cancer, which at the time I didn't think it was that serious, but unfortunately it spread through my body. I then had to have the next 6 months plus of my life with chemo and treatment and surgeries and ups and downs that goes with a cancer diagnosis. But fortunately I was still young. I could overcome those side effects and the surgeries and the like. Eventually, years go on, got the 5-year all clear. I was 26 at that stage, got told I was cancer-free. The chance of relapse was pretty much non-existent. I'd just been promoted to captain in the army, moved over to Brisbane with my now wife, even got lined up for a deployment overseas, ticking all the boxes that I wanted to tick in my life. And most importantly, didn't let cancer define who I am or who I was, which is a really important thing, because often when you're going through something like that, doctor's appointments, the anxiety that goes with scans, however you're feeling, it's all of that forms part of your cancer journey. But then, after feeling that sort of freedom, happiness, life was going to plan. I got the 5-year all clear scan in, it was mid 2018. And then I was feeling fantastic. And then literally 2 or 3 months later, my bowel started playing up. There were a few symptoms, went off to the doctor, went down the whole sort of the process, which I didn't do 5 years earlier with the testicular cancer. I sort of put that off and allowed it to spread. But this time I was like, oh, something's not right here. Went off to the doctor. One thing led to another. And then eventually I was told I had bowel cancer. At 26, and that was a completely unrelated cancer. It wasn't a relapse of my testicular cancer. It was an entirely new cancer that was in my colon. So that was difficult, because it's kind of, I just got through that for 5 years, and here I was with a completely unknown. And bowel cancer's not that you want to ever get cancer, but bowel cancer is not one that you typically want to get. It's now the biggest cancer killer for people aged 25 to 35. It's the second biggest cancer killer overall for any age in Australia. And it's something that can be quite aggressive, and it can spread, and it can be hard to treat. And that was sort of the end of 2018. And from then until now, I've had, half a dozen bowel surgeries and emergency surgeries and treatments and all the good stuff. And I sit here today, fortunately, being cancer-free, which is fantastic. But as a result of being cancer-free, they had to literally remove my whole large bowel, including my rectum and colon. And also last year had a bit of a emergency surgery, had to remove a big chunk of my small bowel. So I guess I'm grateful, and I generally am grateful that I'm cancer free, and I'm lucky enough to still be here at early 30s and be able to share my story. But I think you tell that to a lot of people, and they go, "Fuck, fantastic, that's brilliant." But my quality of life at times isn't great because as a result of all these surgeries and treatments and lack of bowel, sometimes I have really bad days and a lot of pain. I've been on strong painkillers for a fair while now. So I'm about to commence in the next sort of couple of weeks a fecal transplant, which I'm really looking forward to. It's kind of one of those things that they said, let's try it. And it goes for 6 months. You quite literally get someone else's fecal matter, infuse it into my gastrointestinal tract, essentially replace my whole gut microbiome. And that doesn't just hopefully change the way I live in terms of going to the bathroom and my bowel movements, but also your energy, your mental health. There's lots of research in how gut microbiome is like your second brain, all that sort of stuff. So I'm actually looking forward to it in a weird way to hopefully seeing some massive improvements and some changes. And yeah, I literally start that in a couple of weeks. So I'm hopefully, I can provide some positive updates. But that's a very sort of quick snapshot of the last, I guess, 10 or so years of my life. But here I am.
Wow. Honestly, congratulations on that journey to even come to where you are today, and how exciting for that new process to start with you. And I wish you the best of luck of that, which I'm sure we're going to dive into. But I really want to unpack, I guess, from the start. When you got that first cancer diagnosis, as you said, you were in the army and you were still quite young. Do you believe that you were really naive at the start, thinking, with the symptoms and not probably seeking help when you should have?
Yeah, 100%. A lot of people, we do think we're invincible, especially sort of younger people, in your 20s and your 30s. And I think it's one of those things that you watch these things on the movies in Hollywood, and, you see people that get really sick or have, something like cancer and their bald head hooked up to a chemo chair. And until it impacts you or your family or people close to you, you never think it's going to happen to you. And I think that's just a natural response that we all have. You get the whole like, shit, that poor person's going through X. But if it doesn't impact you directly or those closest to you, you can't really relate, and you never think that you'll be in that position. And I was one of those people. I was, almost finishing 4 years of army training. I was fit, I was healthy, I was going out on weekends doing what every young 20-year-old does. So something like cancer or that, diagnosis would have never crossed my mind. And then even when I was, I guess, first diagnosed, I was probably a bit sort of naive in what it was. I kind of thought, oh yeah, like let's go. I'm sure it will be fine. And then I think as soon as I found out it had spread, and then I had to have the chemo and the follow-up stuff, and I'd lose all my hair. And I think that's the sort of the moment that it hit me, because I thought, well, hang on a second, how's that going to impact my career, my life? I was a single bloke at that stage. How's this going to change my life? Even the way you look, you look so different. You lose all your hair, your face is puffed out from steroids. You look pretty unwell. And I was only 21. You're kind of in a bit of a vulnerable age, really. So yeah, I think that was tough in the fact that young people can be very naive, but when you're faced with these things, you're forced to deal with it. But one thing I was never good at, especially in those early years, was how I spoke about it. And I didn't really express my emotions, and I kind of underestimated the importance of looking after your mental health. And we'll obviously probably dive into that. But over the years, it was pretty detrimental, and I just got so good at putting on that mask and that front. Everyone be like, shit, you're so bloody brave all the time, and how are you so optimistic and positive? But as with most social media, it's you often see the surface level stuff and the things you want people to see. And 99% of people wouldn't have seen the behind the scenes of me crying and being emotional and being angry and being essentially depressed. No one really saw that. So look, it's tough to go through at that age, especially as a young bloke, early 20s in the army. You feel like you're bulletproof, and then you're like, hey, guess what? You've got cancer that spread through your body. You're like, oh shit. But yeah, it definitely is difficult.
Were you ever scared that you weren't going to make it?
I think definitely absolutely my bowel cancer part of my health journey. I've definitely had times where I've either didn't think I was going to make it, or times where I didn't necessarily want to keep going. Two kind of pretty different things, which we can discuss. But I think for the testicular cancer stuff, I think because I was so young, and because testicular cancer typically is one of the cancers with a relatively good prognosis, even for long term, even if it spreads, it's pretty reactive to chemotherapy. And I guess I knew that from the start, and that was something that the specialist kind of wanted to almost reassure me in saying, mate, chemo is absolutely going to knock you around. However, fortunately, testicular cancer is one of the more reactive cancers to this particular chemo cocktail. So there's a very, very strong chance that it's going to do what it needs to do. And I think when you hear that, it's quite reassuring, as opposed to something like bowel cancer, where the statistics aren't so good if it spreads. So yeah, in a way, I was pretty optimistic during my early 20s going through the testicular cancer stuff.
Yeah, I mean, well, you go through that and you go through all the treatment, all the processes, and you feel like you've overcome one hurdle. You basically feel like you can go then and live a normal life and go out there. You've done your adversity, you've ticked off, I guess, your suffering in your lifetime, and then you hit with another blow. Do you remember in that moment when you were diagnosed the second time with bowel cancer? Well, obviously the first time, sorry, bowel cancer, second time with cancer. What was running through your head and how you were feeling?
Yeah, that was a lot tougher. I think I was just a bit older, like I was 26. I had a long-term partner. You felt like you had more responsibilities in life, and I think, you didn't have the comfort of, I don't know, being at home with your parents or that safety blanket. I was kind of my own independent adult. And I think as a result of what I went through with testicular cancer, I did learn a lot more about, chronic illnesses and diseases and different cancers and all that sort of stuff, which I probably wouldn't have known otherwise. And so I think when I found out that I had bowel cancer, that was very difficult. I think more so in the fact the timing of it was not great. It was a couple months after I'd just been given the, mate, go continue a happy, healthy life. That's all. My oncologist literally said, I don't need to see you again, mate. And I got almost a bit emotional saying, the last time I had to see him, and I'd been seeing him for over 5 years. Then boom, a couple months later, you're back in the doctor's rooms with an entirely new cancer. And that's kind of like, it was almost like I didn't accept it at the start, because it was kind of, like, how can that be? I've just been told I'm clear. And I remember that was the kind of the first time, I often talk about this, when I left the doctor's rooms and I was with Amber, processed everything, asked all the questions. He'd already booked me in to see a colorectal surgeon. And I remember leaving the doctor's rooms. I was in my army uniform, and I just burst into tears. And that was probably the first time I'd, even in front of Amber, my partner, to that level, just completely let my emotions out. Like it's almost like that, that weight on my shoulders, that sort of that brave kind of, that mask that I was often so good at wearing, that was enough. And I just remember that moment where I just burst into tears. And I was absolutely scared. And yeah, I guess getting into the car as well, and then calling your parents. As you know, with these health things, it impacts more than just you. It impacts your family, your loved ones, those closest to you. And I think for me, like, I didn't even tell my parents I was having a colonoscopy, let alone that, and as soon as I told them I had bowel cancer, I remember hearing my dad get quite emotional on the phone, and he's not really an emotional guy. And that made me really emotional. Because it impacts everyone, and you're causing your family pain, even though you might not be able to help it. And I'm sure you can relate to some of that, when you hate the fact that you're causing your family pain, and they will always be there to support you, but you kind of feel a bit guilty as a result. And even today, I still have that sense of sometimes that guilt, and the fact that, if Amber's has to look after me, or if I'm causing, stress for my family or my parents, I still feel a bit of that today. But yeah, that was a very difficult part of my life, that initial whirlwind of of finding out, telling family, and what next. The unknowns, right, is obviously some of the hardest things. It's the unknowns. Like, I didn't know what to expect. You just feel like you're just going through the process. But eventually you get through it all, and you take one step at a time, and go from there. But yeah, I don't know. It's funny, right? I'm sure you've got exactly the same moments in your life, good and bad. This obviously being bad, that you can remember the smallest details of. You can remember, leaving the doctor's rooms and getting into the car, and, remember those finer details. Whereas, sometimes we forget what we did this morning or yesterday. But things like that, you can just remember it so clearly, because it's obviously such a significant part of your life. But yeah.
It's weird. And even sometimes the moments when nothing is said, where it's just a moment where you're sitting alone somewhere in a car with someone with you, or you're by yourself, or those moments, when you just burst into tears, and you just have this realization of life is all just unpacking right now. And it's those moments that I find, you hold on to, and you look back in hindsight and go that they shaped you. But at the time, they're just the overwhelming sense of emotion that you feel that you can't control is just so much. And I mean, even looking at that, when you started taking the tests and you started to see symptoms, were you at all concerned that, like, this could potentially be another diagnosis? Like, what was running through your head prior to actually getting the diagnosis when you were taking these tests?
Yeah, look, I must admit, until I got the call from the next day after a colonoscopy from the specialist receptionist, and she said, the results came back, the doctor needs to see you this afternoon. That's when you obviously know that something's not right. No, exactly. Yeah. And that's when I had that sinking feeling in your stomach where you feel sick. But up until that point, I was pretty fine with it all. I think it's maybe because I just assumed it would be fine, because I'd just been cleared of that 5-year scan. My bloods are all fine. The CT scan was all good, and I was feeling pretty good. And even the symptoms, they weren't like, I never had like obvious blood in my stools and stuff where I thought, hang on, this is not good. Like, they were just, my bowels were playing up more than normal, but I've always had a bit of an inconsistent gut, like a bit of IBS growing up, so I've never had a normal bowel. So that's why for me, it was, this is a bit worse than my normal. I was going a few more times. I was getting up during the night, bit of abdominal pain, but I thought, I might just be having a flare up, or I don't know, I could have Crohn's, ulcerative colitis. So one of these things, I never thought that it would be full-blown bowel cancer. So I think I was pretty optimistic during it all. And even after the colonoscopy, I remember waking up, and Terry, the gastroenterologist, said, he's like, Hugo, you've got a couple nasty polyps, which, is a bit uncommon for your age, but look, we've burnt them off. We've sent them off for a biopsy, but look, I wouldn't think too much into it. Let's see you in a couple of weeks to review, where to next. And I thought, oh, sweet. Didn't think anything of it. And that was when the next day you get the call. And it's like, shit, they're rushing you in to see the doctor. It's obviously not good news. And that was the moment that I had that sick feeling in your stomach.
Yeah, I think if you haven't gone through some sort of adversity, which I know a lot of us have, but simple moments like that it's that sinking feeling in your gut where you feel like your whole life is just about to change, and you're about to have no control over the outcome, and you're literally putting it into people and environments and into faith in hope that there will be something better. And I know that you did mention earlier that there was a point there where you felt like you just didn't want to keep going, which is absolutely fair. I feel a lot of us get to those points and we're going through something and we just want to give up. At what point do you believe that you got to that point, and why do you believe you got there?
Look, I think the human body in general is pretty resilient. I think a lot of people, it sounds weird, but I think if a lot of people were in my position, they would have done what I've done. Like, it's okay, maybe me branching out and starting my not-for-profit and doing all this stuff, okay, maybe not to that level necessarily, but as far as the surviving aspect of going through the cancer, going to the doctors, the surgeries, to recovery, like, you don't really have a choice. And And I think people are often surprised about how resilient they can be when they're faced with these things. But then at the same time, it does get to the point where you kind of, the old, like, enough's enough. And I think for me, there've been some times over the last few years where, it almost has been, enough's enough. Like, I don't know if I can keep putting up with this pain, what I'm going through. It's just too painful, both physically and mentally. And I think they're the times where you almost give up. I think that's the scary stage of losing a bit of that hope. And I think hope's massive. And I've always been one for hope. Like, as long as you have a little bit of hope for whatever it is, like for me, it's, oh, sweet, I've got this fecal transplant I'm about to start. It gives me that new energy, that new hope. But if you kind of exhausted all your options, you're kind of sitting in there in pain, you don't have any of that hope. You kind of have that whole, like, what's the point? And I have had that a few times, and that's not a great place to be in. And that was when my mental health was definitely at its lowest, and I don't think I was mentally resilient enough to get through some of those. Whereas now I think it's at a stage where if I was to go through something again, I work a lot more on my mental health. I'd hopefully be in a position where I can not get to those dark thoughts and those dark days, which I have previously been in. So I think it's just, it's the mix of not necessarily prioritizing my mental health over the years, getting to a stage where it was just one thing after another. And then when you're in the absolute depths of the darkest moments and you've lost the hope, there's no light at the end of the tunnel, and you're kind of sitting there going, well, what's the point? I'm bloody over it. And you're numbing yourself on painkillers and all that sort of stuff. Not a great place to be in, but it's something that I reflect on, and I'm open enough to say, yep, I've been in those days. It hasn't all been good. But I know that I can get through them now. So if I'm faced with it, next week, next month, next year, I'll be like, all right, we'll get through this too. So it's something that, I guess it's resulted in a positive. But I wouldn't say I'd want to go back to those days. That's for sure.
Because it's funny, a lot of us, we do talk about resilience and the human factor of, if we're faced with a challenge, we do bring out that resilience. And it's almost we go into survival mode, where for a period of time, we block everything out and we just have to get the job done in order to survive. But there does come a point where, as you said, you do have to deal with your mental health and how you feel about the trauma that you're experiencing. And in the position that you're in today, do you feel that you've healed from everything that you've been through mentally?
I think I've definitely come a long way. I wouldn't say I'm completely healed. I don't think I'll ever be healed, like in the sense of, I think I always have to keep working on it. I see little moments I might feel like I've gone backwards a bit. My wife would be the best one to see that. Like we spoke at the behind the scenes part of, she would be the first to say I've definitely come a long way, but I've also get the times where, I get pretty frustrated with, I don't know, if I get up at 2 a.m. and I'm in pain and I have to run a bath or take a painkiller, it's, the frustration can come out then. But I think I definitely am healed in the fact that I don't have those thoughts anymore of I'm over it. I'd rather not be going through this. Those real dark thoughts of when I was absolutely depressed, and I was not necessarily a good person to be around. I've definitely come a long way as far as now. I just don't have those anymore. I just have more of the everyday ups and downs that often we can all experience in life. And I'm also willing to recognize that. And I'll say to Amber now, I don't know why, I'm just not feeling great this morning. I'm not in the greatest mood. And I'll let her know that, rather than in the past just kind of taking it out on her or other people. I now articulate it and say, I don't know what's caused this now, but I can just feel I'm just not in a good headspace. So I might put my little calm app on, take the dogs for a walk or whatever. And before you know it, you kind of get out of that and you go, okay, cool. That didn't stay around for too long. Whereas it used to stay around for days at a time, sort of thing, which is obviously in line with depression symptoms and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think for me, it will be an ongoing journey. I know some people hate the word journey, but I like it. I think it is a journey, ups and downs or whatever. But sometimes I say journey and people call me out for it and they say, I don't like that word. Whatever.
Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but yeah, I agree. I do like the word journey because I feel like life, yeah, it's up and down and it throws shit at us all the time. And we shouldn't be aiming for an outcome or a result. It's, as you said, it's this journey.
Exactly. Everyone follows a different timeline in life, and whether it's a career, personal, relationships, ups and downs of life. But you're right, from one point to the other, it definitely is that life's journey, and you're never just going to have good parts the whole time. There's going to be some bad ones in there, but I definitely feel it's a yeah. Look, and I think you could probably agree with that. I know you've absolutely got your own amazing sort of inspiring story, and I had a look at that and what you've gone through, and especially at such a young, vulnerable age. But I'm sure you're the same as far as the whole. It's an ongoing process with your mental health. You can't just go, "Yep, I'm completely healed and I'm fantastic the rest of my life." I'm sure you still have things that you need to work on, or you might still see a psychologist. Like I still see my psychologist, once a month. I'm actually seeing her tomorrow, which is good. And even when you think that you're like, my health is good and I'm doing well with my job, and the times that I go, actually, I don't think I need to see my psychologist today. I go, no, I'm booked in. I go see them, and you'd probably
Yeah.
agree with this. You walk out and you go, oh, fuck, I'm so glad I saw her today.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I feel like you don't have to go through something traumatic. There's this whole conversation around, big trauma T and little trauma T. And we're all human and we all experience things that are challenging in life and it affects people in completely different ways. And it can bring up different reactions and emotions for different people. And that's where I feel that, yeah, it's everybody has their own story and it's something that we all have to navigate. I mean, so sure, people have walked the path before us and have learnt things along the way, but you're still the person that's in your life experiencing it the way through your lens, and you have to. You're the only one that can walk through it and can learn and can adapt and can to develop in this world and find the tools and strategies to help yourself. It's something that, yeah, we can share in order to help and to advocate, but the end of the day, it comes down to the sole purpose, person, sorry, and how they really take a hold of their journey and what they do with that story that they really walk.
Yeah, no, completely agree with you. And look, I think as well, the psychologist side of things or therapy, I know that there's shortages in psychologists, especially certain communities and rural areas and stuff like that. So I appreciate that. It might not be easy for someone just to book into a psychologist next week, but in the ideal world, I think everyone should see a psychologist. Like if, there were no constraints and there were an abundance of psychologists, I think, everyone would get something out of it, because essentially it's someone there to just listen to give you a few little tips that may or may not help, but they're just there to essentially listen, right? And having someone to just like unbiased opinions of what you're going through, that's not necessarily family or friends, and they can just sit there with no judgment and talk things through. And I think if everyone had that, they would get something out of it. If they continued it long enough or found a psychologist that was right for them and they connected with, you're going to get something out of it. Essentially, it's probably no different to life coaches or career coaches and that sort of concept. It's just someone there to help with whatever you're going through, assist you. And I think it's something that I definitely encourage my mates, if they're in a position to and able to, is to see a psychologist. Even like you said, if you're pretty mentally healthy and you don't necessarily have massive things going on, it's still beneficial.
And I think there's that talk around you only have to be mentally ill to see a psychologist, where I think it just couldn't be so wrong, because we're all sitting in this mental health spectrum. But at the end of the day, if you're working on your mental health, you need to constantly be releasing the baggage that you're holding up there and the emotion, because we know the more that you store that in, the more it builds up, and then the more that you eventually explode. And that's where challenges can come in, and unfortunately, other issues can come in. So I couldn't agree more. If you can find a psychologist or a strong support network that can really just give you permission to vent. I know for me, that's basically what it is. I just need to go in there and I just need to vent. And then I need someone, they don't even have to quote unquote fix you. It's just going in there so that someone can give you, as you said, like the necessary tools if you want them. Otherwise, just the permission for someone to listen that is, as you said, unbiased, not judgy. In a world that's very judgmental, I think it's very needed.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's yeah, like I even even if you can't get a psychologist, having a good mate or someone in your life that you can just, I'm all for having banter and chatting about the footy or whatever, but then having someone in your life that you can actually, I'd work for a charity called Gotcha for Life. And that whole concept is having that Gotcha for Life person, it's whether it's 2 a.m, it's early morning on a Monday, Sunday, whatever, you can just message them, call them, and they're going to be there for you and you're going to be there for them. And if you just have at least that one person in your life, I think that's hugely important. So it doesn't even have to be a clinician. It can just be someone that you're close to in your life, which you know that you can just open up to. So important.
Now, you did mention earlier about hope, and I'm a big advocate for hope because I believe that, through no matter what you're going through, if you have something to hold on to really motivate you to get through life, I feel is something that can just impact someone's life just so positively. And it's something that gives you purpose to wake up and enjoy and really push towards. And you mentioned that, there is this potential treatment that could really help you. Have you also come to the point where maybe if it doesn't work, what that may look for you and how that will impact your hope for your recovery?
Yeah, look, it's a really good point, and I definitely have thought about that, and I think the other option is if things still aren't, if I'm still in this lot of pain, and it doesn't work, then I can go back to having a permanent bag or a stoma, which is essentially part of my small bowel will be coming out of my stomach, and that's how I'll go to the bathroom, and that will eliminate some of the discomfort and pain and hopefully improve my quality of life. And it's even knowing that that's an option. I lived a pretty normal life when I had a bag for, almost a year. I kind of think, okay, that's also not the end of the world either. So I guess for this fecal transplant, I'm hopeful that it will improve things. But I guess I'm not so overly optimistic that, I know that also, hang on, in the past 10 years, I've had things that work and then they don't work. And you have to be a bit realistic too. So yeah, I've got good at being more realistic as far as I'm always optimistic, but I'll never go too far and be pessimistic and go into it and say this fecal transplant won't work. But you're right. You do need a little bit of that realistic part of saying, well, hey, if it doesn't work, I don't want you to put everything into it working and then you're just going to be absolutely devastated when it doesn't. So it's a bit of the expectation management that I definitely try and have with these sort of things.
Because it's hard. I believe we live in this world where people say things a lot and they're like, you just got to manifest it. There's no doubt in your mind that it's not going to work. But then unfortunately we do hear of experiences where things don't turn out and, people are let down by unfortunately things that they've put so much energy into and then you see them crumble. So I believe it is a really hard conversation where you really do want to be hopeful and you want to hold on to something so tightly to really push you through. But then at the same time, you almost have to have your plan B and you have to have your backup and be prepared to support yourself if what you put all your energy into does not turn out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I guess looking beyond into your journey now and where you're at, you did mention that you are involved with a non-for-profit, which is very exciting. Why did you decide to take this path? I mean, a lot of people decide once they've overcome something or if they're still struggling, they wipe their hands clean. They're like, that part of my life is over. I never want to revisit that. I've healed or I'm still healing. I want to move on with my life. Why did you decide to continue this journey and to really advocate in this space?
Yeah, look, I think it was a moment I had where I almost started for selfish reasons. And that was through a chat with my psychologist who, this was when I was in my, having some really down days. I was not in a good headspace and she encouraged me to share a bit of my story, as almost, a form of, journaling, which you can then sort of share it to someone else. And then it acts as a form of therapy in a way of, you can realize that, yes, this is a bad thing you're going through and you might not see it now, but one day this thing you're going through might actually be a positive in your life. This could lead to things that you wouldn't have otherwise led to. And also it could potentially help people. it's easy to say that reflecting back on that, but if you're in the moment, it can be pretty difficult to see that. Like if you're in your, so much pain, you're hating life, you're not in a good headspace. It's pretty hard to just look into that future and go, no, this is all part, this is going to be a good thing. But it honestly has been, I wouldn't want to go through it again, but I also wouldn't be in the position I'm in now. I wouldn't have met my wife if I hadn't gone through, my early sort of cancer stuff. I wouldn't have met some amazing people, friendships, relationships, and I wouldn't have been in a position to be able to help others. And, I've had examples of saving lives, which is a pretty powerful thing that a lot of people might not ever experience. And then to be able to experience that is so rewarding. But finding that passion, that purpose, the cliche, the why, for me, it's like, well, I've kind of found that through unique circumstances. But so that's, I guess for me, it's something, making the best of that bad situation. And I think, you could have had the two options, play that victim card, life sucks, why me? And then potentially get through it and, never want to talk about it again because it's such a traumatic part of your life. And like, I can respect that for sure for a lot of people. Or the option that I took and the option that some people decide to take is that, you know what, I can't control what I've gone through, but I can control what I do with it now, or, making it worthwhile and hopefully using what I've gone through to help others. And then realizing that can then be beneficial to you. So it's like that, I think it was Frank Reisman, helper theory, which talks about like helping others can help you more than it can help them because it makes you feel good. It's why people volunteer. It's why people, work for charities and do all this stuff because it actually makes them feel good, but you also help others. Like it's a win-win, right? And so, I always encourage others that never underestimate your story and the power of what you've gone through and how it can help others. Even if it's your close little network and friendship group, or if it's to a larger scale, never underestimate that it can actually bloody help people. And so, that's what kind of got me into that work. And I started out just, which I'm sure you've done, like, sharing your story and written story, and then, coming on these sort of podcasts or, working for charities and doing media stuff. And then, now I'm into the whole speaking stuff, which I absolutely love. And I get no greater feeling when I finish a big talk to whatever audience and you finish that and you feel like you do feel proud, and for me, that's an important trait to have, that you can actually feel proud in yourself and how far you've come. And, you look at the audience or, people who are coming up to you afterwards and thanking you, and you're like, you know what, I'm proud for how far I've come, but what I'm trying to achieve now, which is a pretty awesome feeling.
When you're doing all these speeches and presentations and advocacy work, does it ever sort of distract you with actually what you're going through and what you're having to go through day to day with the physical and mental pain?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. I think, definitely it does. It does distract me for sure, like in that moment. But it's interesting. I think sometimes I talk about things and then I almost feel a bit guilty if I'm not doing that myself all the time. But in a way, it forces me to. It's kind of like your own
Keeping you
therapist.
accountable.
Yeah, holding you accountable. It's like, hang on, I know I believe in this. I know it's helpful. I've just been telling all these people to do it. Hang on, I'm not doing it right now. You know what? I'm going to get back into doing that gratitude journaling or whatever. I think you're right. It can be a distraction. It can be, and sometimes look, it can also be a bit triggering. And I think, you can probably appreciate this is you can talk about these moments or reflect on them. And every now and then I can get quite emotional when I'm talking about, I spoke about earlier in this episode of, calling my parents up, or what it would be like being a dad or a father and watching your kid, son go through this and, feeling like, you're helpless and this sort of stuff. And every time I did a presentation a couple of weeks ago, and it's the first time Amber, my wife, had been there for my whole, proper presentation. And she was literally sitting there in the audience, and there was quite a large audience. And I remember like literally taking like one look at her and I could see her tear up, and she's been a massive part of what I've gone through. And then I got really emotional and you choke up on stage, but that's part of it. And it's also what headspace you're in. Sometimes if I'm doing a talk and I'm just feeling pretty emotional, sometimes proper crying. I really have to try and get out of it. But that's all part of that whole reason why I'm sharing my story and being vulnerable. But yeah, look, it can be a bit of escapism. It can be slightly triggering, reliving some of those memories. But all in all, the experience of sharing your story and helping someone else, and you can actually see that person you've helped, or 6 months, a year later, you get a message from some random that you have never met on Instagram or whatever saying, just want to let you know, you saved my life as a result of blah, blah, blah. You go, shit, that's the stuff that gives you goosebumps sort of stuff, it gives you a big smile on your face. And that's the more of that I do, the more I realize that, hang on, this is more of this needs to be done. Which is an awesome feeling. I'm sure you can relate to some of that when, you've probably helped many people, and, it's quite a beautiful experience knowing that you can use that terrible part of your life to help someone else.
I think it's quite surreal as well, because there's moments where, you're speaking or you're just talking one-on-one to someone, and I often just get lost in my story. Like, it becomes just another part of me. And then I'm reminded constantly that, oh no, that actually happened to me. Like, that was a part of me, and that was real and it was raw. And a lot of people, say, how did you get through that? And as you mentioned earlier, it's just something that you do. You can't explain it. It's just something that, it was a period of my life that, yeah, there was struggle, but you got through it. And how do you just stay silent now? How do you not share it and help others?
It's a really good point. It's a great point. Sometimes, and if you tell your story enough, part of it, it's almost not real. And you forget that someone you're telling to for the first time, there might be people listening to this that go, obviously, they've probably never heard of my story. Or if I'm, in a new presentation or whatever, and you forget that the people listening to that's the first time they've heard it, and they listen to it and go, holy shit, blah, blah, blah. And, they might get a bit emotional. But then if you've done it enough, you just kind of get so used to just talking about it. But I think it's important to remember, like, you're spot on, that someone that you're talking to, it's the first time they've heard it, and you might rush through it and go, yeah, I went through this for a number of years. And they go, Jesus, that's a lot. And you go, actually, yeah, it is. But I don't know how. It's all a bit of a blur sometimes, the years kind of blend into one, and you're like, yeah.
Yeah. And the traumas just blend into one.
Yeah, they do. It's weird how that all works. But yeah,
that's the thing, like, when you say as well, you get to a point where you've gone through so much, you've had so many highs in your life, both, good and bad. How do you then go on just to live a quote unquote normal life? Like, where there is no chase or there's no excitement? Because I remember when I was going through my journey, my life was so heightened for so long because we were in that survival mode. And then you come down a little bit and you face reality, and you're having to deal with everyday problems, and almost that, even though the excitement or the heightened stress was bad, it's like, well, now everything's mundane. How do you find dealing with that?
Yeah, it's a good one. I think you're right. I've actually think about this sometimes, like when I've been in a hospital a number of times, and like this time last year, I was in hospital for a bowel obstruction and surgery and stuff like that. But when you're in that hospital, the outside world, it almost like it doesn't exist. It's like you're in your own little bubble, and you're like your day to that day. You might watch a couple Netflix shows or go for a small walk or have a shower by yourself, which is a massive thrill. And you're kind of in that little bubble, and you get lots of supportive messages, which is really lovely. And like, it's kind of like a distraction in a weird way, like you said, from the normal world. The random daily stresses that we all have at work, or sitting in the traffic, or, bloody burning your finger on the stove or whatever, stuff like that we all stress, like it loses that. Like, it's kind of in your own weird reality. And I think in a way, part of that's like I don't know, like you want to take part of that and put it into your normal life and be able to appreciate that warm shower in the morning, or, that first time you can eat for the first time in a month, or whatever. You want to try and take that same level of excitement you get from those wins than you do in the real life. Because you're right. I think the real life, we do take the little things for granted. But then as far as the other side of it goes, where I also completely agree with you. And it's hard is when you have those highs, or, I do these talks or work for these charities, or, doing a podcast and doing all these cool things. And then you go to a normal job, like parts of my job in the army. And like, it's hard to then kind of say, like, I don't have that same passion and purpose. And I guess that can be a challenge. But now I'm kind of at that stage in my life where I'm early 30s. I've been through so much. I've got so many ideas and things I want to do. And I've found that purpose. And I said before, that why, that like, it's getting to a stage where you go, all right, I'm just going to bloody go all in on this stuff. Like, why not? Why can't I just invest my whole everything into this? And how happy and amazing that would be. But then the other realistic side comes back and says, yep, you also live in Sydney, you got bills to pay, you got to be a bit responsible and have a bit of a safety blanket for now, that's okay. But don't get me wrong, there are times where you just feel like just going, nah, I just want to do this. That's all I want to do.
Yeah, you just have this mindset, I feel, of, you've been at rock bottom, you've been at the end. So you're like, well, what do I have to lose? I may as well just throw everything in. And then, as you said, you get like some responsible person that comes and just brings you back to earth and is like, no, sustainability.
Yep. No, but look, it's good. I think it's good to have the conversations, though. It's part of life. I think it's realizing what you do, what you want to do in your life, and setting your little goals and sights for that.
And as you said before, having grace and gratitude through it all. It's crazy how, we're sold all these big things in order to heal or be the best version of yourself. But in the day, most of the things that actually work are things that you don't have to pay for, that are simple. Journaling, being grateful, meditation, doing slow movement, or doing movement that suits you, and nourishing your body. Those small things that can really help you and fuel your soul as well. This has been honestly an amazing conversation, and I'm so grateful to hear your story and be able to share your story on our platform with our community. I think my final question that I really just want to put to you, you've shared your story for so long and it has been up and down, but what do you actually want people to take away from hearing your story?
Yeah, look, there's so many bloody takeaways and messaging, that go to your GP, have annual checkups, checking on your mates, blah, blah. But I guess my one key takeaway that I'd love everyone to try live their lives with, or one key thing to remember, and I've finished my presentations with this, is the fact that, life is precious, and not to take it for granted. And I think that's such a key point that we often in life, when you're healthy, things aren't going wrong. You don't realize that how precious life is. And it's not until you go through these things that, we've gone through and a lot of other people go through, where you kind of sit back and reflect on that and go, geez, you know what? Like, I look at myself and go, I'm bloody lucky to still be here. I'm lucky to be given this opportunity to chat to you today, to share my story, because there are so many other people that aren't as lucky as I am. And that's just the honest truth. So realizing that life is precious and not to take those days for granted, the cliche things of, going out and looking around nature and, taking everything in. But for me, that's what it's all about. If we can all live our lives with that, we spoke about the gratitude component, and realizing that things like warm showers in the morning, or, giving your loved one a big hug, or taking your dogs for a walk, they're amazing things to do. And I think if everyone took that mindset in life and realized that they didn't want to take these things for granted, and they gave their mum a call more, they gave their mates a big hug, and they were just, better people for it. I think there's, we're going to go a long way. But that's one thing I'd love people to take away listening to this now, is realizing that, I'm going to do something right now, and realize that, even if it's something small, which I love talking about, is like messaging your mate. We've all got those mates that we don't reach out to, and we go, geez, how quick's this year gone? Geez, we're already in bloody October, and, we all do it, but going, you know what? I'm going to reach out to someone, I'm going to make their day, realizing that, this is a gift to even just be here. And that's something that I'd love people to take away.
Do you take away the same thing from your story?
Yeah, look, I do. And I think that's one awesome thing, is that I have those moments. And when I have those moments, it's a bloody awesome feeling when I sit there and I actually truly believe that. And you kind of just get this beautiful feeling of like, yeah, actually, Fuck, that's awesome. Like life is so precious, and I'm so bloody grateful and happy with everything I've got or everything I'm going through. I don't always have that. Like, it's impossible to live your life, all the time with that mindset. I think it'd be very hard to do that. But when you kind of become grounded, and me saying this now, the cool thing is once we end this podcast, I'll feel hopefully pretty good and realize actually that's awesome. My wife will come through the door soon. I'll give her a big hug. And like, for me, it's like, that's great. I'm still learning. I'm still trying to achieve these things. But when you do it, and when you take that moment to truly reflect on that simple phrase, life is precious, don't take it for granted, I think it's something that we can all take so much out of.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And there's constant reminders are definitely something that we need. So thank you so much for jumping on today. And as I said, like, congratulations on your journey. It has been a very tough one where it seems like you haven't had a break, but honestly, from where you've started to where you are now, you should be so proud of how far you've come. And I know that you are probably helping so many people out there and just sharing what you've been through. And thank you, honestly, from the bottom of my heart and the entire community. Yeah, thank you for all that you're doing, and we're very grateful to have you here still.
No, thank you, Ashley. When you reached out, I really appreciated it. You do some really amazing work with, the platform you've created and the conversation you've started as a result. And I've got no doubt there'll be hundreds, thousands of people whose lives that you've positively impacted. So can't wait to keep following you on the Secret Burden podcast along, and hopefully one day we can meet up face to face.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. And in the meantime, where can people find you?
Look, the initiative that I'm in early stage with the government talking and about to become a registered charity is called 25 Stay Alive, and that's stemmed from my own experiences, and it's essentially for young people to be proactive with their physical and mental health, which is really exciting stuff that's in the pipeline for that. And then otherwise, my Hugo Toovey, whether or not I go on Instagram every now and then, reach out, send me a message. I'm one of those people that I don't have many bloody followers, so I'll always get back to each and every one of you. So I won't leave you there in the requests area. I love getting random messages from whoever. Yeah, for whoever. And I think that's the beauty of when you're just like a normal, relatable person, is that hopefully someone listening to this sends me a message. They're probably going through their own journey. And I love just connecting to random people from all over who have all got their own little life stories. And I'll definitely put the time to have a chat or get back to you. So that's probably the best way.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much once again. And thank you to everyone out there as well for listening and tuning in and hearing Hugo's story. It's been an amazing session, one that I'm very grateful to have. As I said, getting that warm feeling already. And we will catch you all very soon.